This video is intended only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. This happened just yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. I'm not quite sure what to think of it because it was just so bizarre and unbelievable. I might have just been sleep deprived. So last night at maybe 2300 hours, I was walking around my block. My town is relatively safe, so I didn't feel in danger, plus it was a pretty night. I had been walking around for 5 minutes when a pale woman with blonde hair and a white dress caught my eye from across the street. She was about my height and looked to be about my age too. I didn't actually pay attention to her after I first noticed her. While I circled the block again, she was on the same street, a couple feet in front of me. She was standing on the curb staring at cars passing by. It was a main road, so even that late, people were still driving on it. I said hello to her, and she turned her gaze to me. I couldn't see her face super well, but from what I think I saw, she had no pupils or color in her eyes. She just stared at me. After a while, I asked if she was okay. She didn't respond again and simply pointed at the road. I was really confused and didn't understand. Right as a red car started coming down the road, she stepped into the road. The car slammed into her, and it was a bloody mess. The driver immediately stopped and jumped out. It was a man in his mid-20s. We both spoke about it, freaking out. He called the police, and I went around the car to see the state of the girl. Once I circled around the car, she was gone. Not gone as in dead, gone as in she wasn't there. The blood on the road was gone too, but not gone from his car. After the police arrived, they concluded that it was some big hoax of a kid who didn't know what they were talking about, and some guy who just went along with it. The blood on the truck was brought to investigation, only to be found as paint. Nothing else was put up about it. I am still not sure if what happened was real. It felt so real, but I don't believe in the paranormal. I don't know what it was. Was it just a dream, or was it real? I remember it like it was real. I feel like I can't leave the house now. I don't understand anything now, and I kind of feel like I'm going crazy. Has anyone else experienced something like this? This is the first time I am posting anything online about this. I'm a 31-year-old woman married, and I recently moved back in with my parents due to moving back to the town I grew up in. My husband and I are taking our time looking for our own place, due to wanting something nice in the area, and that is usually hard to find. This story takes place in my parents' house, starting back 10 years ago. A description of the house for a bit of content. It's a 2-story brick stone house in city limits, but still surrounded by nothing but woods. You have to go through a garage that leads into the kitchen with the first bedroom to your left. Past the kitchen is the main living room, and to the right is the hall that is very open. In this area, you will find the main dining room and 2 living areas, but if you continue straight, you will see the staircase to your left, and even further straight is my parents' bedroom and bathroom. Going up the stairs, you will come to the 3rd living area. Yes, this is a huge house, with 2 sets of French doors side by side that lead to the outside balcony. Going straight, the sharp left leads you to the other 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. This is where the story takes place. The first time I stepped foot in this house, I immediately felt off, like something just wasn't right. I felt a presence, but I didn't know what or who it was. I brushed it off thinking I was just reading too much into it. I continued to feel this for the next couple of years, and because of this, I didn't much enjoy visiting them. My parents liked to gamble a lot back then, so they would ask me to babysit my baby brother and sister on the weekends. My boyfriend, now husband, loved them, so he would always babysit with me. The first few times I really didn't pay attention to the feeling I would get because we would be busy playing or eating with the kids. After that, things kinda chilled out and we would end up watching movies until it was time to go to bed. Now my husband is a freak of nature. It's like he falls asleep the second his eyes are closed. Me, on the other hand, it takes me forever to get comfortable enough to wind down my own mind. I also don't sleep well even when I do finally get to sleep. This night was the first time I saw and heard something in this brand new house. In this room, the bed is facing the doorway, but not directly in front of it. With the double doors open, you can see the front of the staircase and all the way down the hallway, as long as the light is on, that is. This night, only one of the hallway lights was on. I was laying in bed with the TV on, but the volume down so low I could hear if one of the kids called me. I was almost asleep when I hear one of my siblings coming down the stairs. I open my eyes a bit and wait for them to get to the bottom, but they never do. I don't think anything of it, close my eyes, and begin to drift off again. A few minutes later, I hear it again. So I open my eyes and wait again, but they never get to the bottom. This time I sit up and listen, a bit spooked, but nothing I couldn't handle. I get a bit nervous, but I still go to see if they are there, and maybe they're scared to come all the way down the hallway or something. No one is there. Confused and thinking I must be dreaming it up, I go back to bed, this time closing one of the double doors. It was a few hours later, around 2:30 a.m., when I feel like something is very near me, as if they are standing next to the bed, right in front of me. Usually when I open my eyes, I would see the green glow of the alarm clock on the bedside table, but this time, I saw nothing. It was pitch black. I couldn't even see the hallway light on, and the TV had turned off on its own. I felt like I couldn't move. I was awake now and scared to my bones. I was finally able to call out my husband's name loud enough to wake him. He reached over and turned on the light, and right then the scared feeling went away and I was able to move. I freaked out and started crying. I couldn't begin to explain to him what happened because even if I had, he didn't believe in those things. So I told him I was having a nightmare and asked him to go check on the kids. When he came back, he said the kids were fine and got back in bed. With the light on, I was able to fall back to sleep, but it took me forever. The next day, I told my mom about what had happened, and that's when she told me. She had been hearing footsteps on the stairs at night and even saw someone standing by the door at times. She didn't tell anyone because she didn't want to scare the kids. This is when she told me what she had done. She wanted to know what was going on in her house, so she went and bought a voice recorder. One day she decided to use it and went upstairs while everyone was gone. She asked your typical questions of who is here, what do you want, and why are you here, and then said, "You have passed away and need to go into the light. You are not welcome here." The next day she decided to leave the recorder in one of the bedrooms upstairs while it was recording for about 4 hours while she was out running errands. I asked if she had checked it, and to my surprise she said she was too afraid to listen to it alone. I wanted to listen to it. Off we went to the computer and began listening to it after it was uploaded. During the 4 hours she was gone, you could hear something clicking or tapping, sounds of a drawer opening and closing, but we weren't sure. Then we listened to the part where she was asking questions. Now you could hear a sound that resembled a fan or maybe static throughout the whole thing, so some sounds were indistinguishable, but the one sound we did hear chilled us to the core. When we asked, "What do you want?" it gave us an answer. It called out my brother's name. I'm changing his name for this part. The answer was, Jamie. It didn't answer any other questions except for that one. I cried immediately. He wasn't having night terrors for no reason. Something was there for him, every night. We soon asked a friend to cleanse the house. For a long time, everything has been okay. My brother stopped having night terrors, my mom was able to sleep comfortably, and all was good again. Until now. I have been living in this house for a month and a half. For the last 3 weeks, I have been seeing things everywhere, especially when I'm alone. Because of this, I won't stay alone anymore. I get this strong feeling of being watched. I had the feeling of someone pulling on my blanket at night. I think it's time for another cleanse. Oh, and just FYI, I am the 3rd generation on my mother's side of the family that is able to see spirits. My dad's side of the family in the past, way before I was born, has practiced black magic. I don't like speaking to them, and I won't dabble in any of the spiritual stuff like most people do. I stay as far away from it as possible, and I recommend that you do too. Even if you are careful, these spirits can haunt you for a long time, even after you're gone. Update. So I'm sitting on the living room floor playing with my nephew. Mom's on the left couch and my sister is on the right couch. My nephew has a toy piano that is made of cloth and can be folded up. The piano is behind us in the corner with all my nephew's other toys. We are talking and watching my nephew attempt to walk when this piano makes a sound. It's like someone is pressing the keys slowly. We stop and stare and then look at each other, shocked. Then the keys are pressed rapidly until it finally shuts off on its own. Mom and I are not scared. My sister is terrified due to something happening to her last night around midnight. But that's a different story. The following is a very true experience. I have never actually wrote this down before, and I don't know if anyone has experienced this too. This happened between 1989 and 1990, and I was about the age of 4 years old. To this day, I still get chills thinking about it, and I wonder if in some way unknown, it changed me. My parents had a house in the Inland Empire of Southern California, and at the time my brother hadn't been born yet, so I was still the only child. To give you a layout, my parents' house was a 2-story house located in a cul-de-sac. On the bottom floor there were 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, the living room, and the kitchen. The second floor was just the master bedroom and bath. All you could see from the street was the garage and one of the bedroom windows on the bottom floor and the window of my mom's bathroom on the second floor. To get to the front door, you had to walk along the cement pathway that ran along the side of the house. You had to pass the first bedroom that you could see from the street, then you passed the bathroom window, and then another bedroom window, and then you would be at the front door. The backyard was beyond that point. My bedroom at the time was the bedroom next to the front door. Now, for some reason, my blinds weren't completely down to the bottom of the window. There was about a 6-inch gap and nothing covering it. I was pretty young, so I didn't really care much about this then. The bed was in the middle of the wall across from my bedroom door, and to the left was the window. According to my mom, this all happened right before midnight. My mom was asleep in her room upstairs, and my dad was a policeman that worked nights in another city. I was fast asleep in my room, and out of nowhere, I suddenly awoke, looking up at the ceiling. I don't know what woke me or if I just popped awake on my own. After my eyes adjusted to the nightlights of my bedroom, I sat up and started looking around my room. All of a sudden, something caught my eye at the window, in the gap. First, I thought it was the streetlight reflecting on the window, but I knew for a fact that there was only one streetlight, and what I was looking at was 2 obvious glowing spots that were spaced apart as if on someone's face. Then I thought, is that a cat looking at me? And yes, I vividly remember thinking these things, trying to debunk this at 4 years old. I had remembered that my cat Chelsea's eyes would reflect at night, but this looked different than that. The cat's eyes would almost have different colors when reflecting. These were 2 very solid, bright, white, glowing eyes, looking straight at me. I just stared at them frozen stiff, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I couldn't see a face at all. The eyes were just so bright, nothing else stood out. That void or face around the eyes looked blacker than the night. I thought again, well, if this is a cat, how could a cat be big like a person, and why would a cat stand up to stare in my bedroom? The curiosity got me, and I went for it. I flipped my covers off, turned my little 4-year-old body towards the window, and put my feet on the floor. This is the moment the creepiest thing happened, and it will forever be burned into my brain. I got off the bed and got on my knees to get a closer look at this so-called cat, when at this very moment, this faceless pair of glowing white eyes began to slowly and steadily tilt to the side, very similar to Michael Myers in Halloween. Eyes still locked on me, not blinking once. The feeling of dread and fear shot through my body. Completely terrified, I burst into tears and immediately booked it down the hallway, through the living room and up the stairs to tell my mom. Although I was going as fast as I could, it felt like it took forever. When I got to my mom, I was so upset. I couldn't get any words out. Tears were streaming down my face, and my mom was becoming seriously concerned at this point. She was able to calm me down just enough for me to get out the words. There is white eyes looking at me through my window on the bottom. Stutter crying hard. Are you sure? My mom asked. I cry out, yes! She didn't even go down to look. She just called the police. I don't remember the time it took for them to arrive or what they said because I finally fell asleep in my mom's bed. I do remember faintly waking up to a knock on the door and my mom going to open it. The cop speaks to her and I hear her say, "Okay, thank you, good night," and she shuts the door. "Did they find it, Mommy?" I asked, half asleep. "No, honey. He said they couldn't find anyone," my mom told me softly. "It's okay now, just try to go back to sleep." It's safe to say that the next day, my whole window was covered. Years fast forward, and I'm in middle school now. Every now and then I would think about that night. Sometimes I wondered if that moment was real, if those eyes were really there, those unforgettable white eyes. One day a random thought came up, and I asked my mom if she remembered that night. She tells me, "Yes, of course. Why?" "I don't know, just wondering, I guess," I said. Then my mom proceeds to say, "Well, I never told you this, but when the deputy came out that night, He told me they made it a priority to get to our house as soon as they could because, not very long before I called 911, they received another call from someone else reporting that someone was looking in their window in our same neighborhood. Hearing that sent chills down my spine, and to this day, I wonder who or what was looking at me that night. I'm a 16-year-old male, and I used to be a bit skeptic to all things paranormal until one weekend at an abandoned house. To give some backstory, I was with my two best friends at the time, Delaney and Julia. We were home alone and bored at Delaney's house with nothing to do. I can't remember whose idea it was, but one of us had the idea to drive around some of the old dirt roads and check out abandoned buildings. There are a lot of abandoned places around where we live. It's pretty far out in the country, surrounded by either farms or woods. So we went to these two old tobacco houses, took a few pictures, and just sort of goofed off. We got back on the road and saw an old, unkept driveway. Keep in mind, hardly anyone lives on this road. So we decided to drive down the driveway, despite Julia saying we shouldn't because it didn't feel right to her. Not the fact that it'd be trespassing, just that she had extremely bad vibes about the place. However, Delaney and I insisted. We drove down it, and it went pretty far back into the woods. This is where weird things started to happen. We parked the truck in a little clearing and noticed an abandoned house in the distance. However, before we got out of the truck, the front sensor went off beeping like crazy, then so did the back one. It was as if someone had walked around the truck. The weird thing about this is we were parked in a clearing, so there was nothing to make the sensors go off. Even if there were, they would have gone off before we even parked the truck and wouldn't have just randomly gone off in that order. Delaney and Julia were kind of freaked out, but I just ignored it. It wasn't until later that this would freak me out too. We all got out of the truck and started walking towards the house. I was in front with my friends walking a decent distance behind me. If I'm honest, I was just showing off and acting fearless. I wasn't that scared until I saw her. A woman with dingy, unkempt-looking hair in a colonial-style dress looking around the corner of the house. She looked at me and just put her finger up to her lips and shushed me very loudly. The feeling I had is almost indescribable. Imagine feeling as if all sense of safety and protection is gone and you don't feel happy at all. My heart felt like it stopped. I started crying. I was so scared. I knew she wasn't human. I don't know how. I just knew. I turned around at my friends and screamed at them to run and started sprinting back to the truck. My phone flew out of my pocket about halfway back to the truck. My friend Julia told me this had happened and I told her to just leave it. Now, if you know me, you'd know if I'm ditching my phone, I'm serious. Julia and Delaney got back to the truck. We tried to open it, but it was locked. Delaney reached for her keys, and they were gone, and so was Julia's phone. It was as if whatever that thing was trying to keep us there. Delaney ran back and picked up Julia and I's phones and found her keys. We got in the truck and floored it out of there back to Delaney's house. You might think it's just coincidental we dropped all of our things, but the thing is, our phones and Delaney's keys were all deep in our pockets, and it didn't make any sense for them to just fall out on their own like that. Later at the house, we were all talking about the entire situation, and I was explaining what I had seen. My friends didn't even hear the shush, nor did they see the woman. I was afraid they didn't believe me, but Julia reassured me that the look on my face and tears were proof enough for her to run as well. We later found out that there have been a few sightings of ghosts on that road by workers at Fort Pickett, a military facility nearby. I am a 25-year-old female. For the purpose of anonymity, I will refer to myself as Sabrina. I am from Romania. English is not my native language, but I shall try my best to make the story easy to be understood. My stories contain what you would call angels, spirits, demons, archangels, and satanic people doing forbidden sessions of voodoo. I sort of believe this is not necessarily a bad encounter, or so I lie to myself, sometimes. There are many stories I would love to share with you. You can either decide to share them or not. I don't mind, but mainly I just want to talk with someone who has went through what I did and can understand and empathize with it based on your personal experiences. This is the one story that I can and will share with you for now. I need time to think if I'm ready to share my less fortunate experiences. I live in Romania. Our country has Orthodox religion, basically very similar to Christianity. We believe in God and Jesus Christ, with certain small similarities and differences. For example, I don't know if this is the same as Catholics, but we keep the deceased for a night. We call it the sleeping duty or guard night. We do not take the body out of its house that he or she has lived in for their entire life in order to help the spirit find its way to heaven easier. The next 2 days, as we bury the bodies after 3 days, we take the body to the church where loved ones, but not relatives, to the deceased may come and pay respects to that person. After this process is concluded, we bury the body at the cemetery where the priest will chant prayers helping the spirit of the deceased understand that he or she is no longer among the living. As Romanians, we are very spiritual people and believe in the afterlife. Spirits and even bad spirits can linger in the world, unable to move on. Understanding this is important, as the story is pretty detailed itself. I had 5 grandparents, 3 grandmothers and 2 grandfathers. My first grandfather, we shall call him Michael, died when I was 6 years old due to a heart attack in August of 2007. He raised me, and his death marked my life ever since because I couldn't grasp the significance of death. I would frequently dream about him, his messages, his signs. I would hear him in my dreams as he would guide me to be a good person and so on. But even then, as a child, I knew what a dream was and what was reality. His wife, whom we shall call Anna, was my adoptive grandmother, as my real by-blood grandmother, named Margaret, had died when my mom was 2 years old due to an abortion. I'm not sure if she was trying to abort my mother or a third child, since my mother has a brother and she was the second child. During the communist years, 1946 to 1989, Romania had a strict law regarding abortions, and women would abort their fetuses on their own in the privacy of their homes by themselves, as no medics would agree to help them with the procedure due to fear of being sentenced to life in prison. She died of septicemia, and my mother grew up without a mother until the age of 6 years old. Needless to say, I never met her or knew anything about Margaret, my blood grandmother. But this story is about my grandmother, adoptive one, named Anna. She was a very spiritual, wise, kind-hearted, and intelligent woman. She never had children of her own. She adopted my mom and uncle. Their names aren't important for the story. My grandfather Michael was only dating my grandmother, but after my mother had met her on a family visit on her side in Isai, Moldova, it's a town in Romania, they got married soon after. How did they decide to get married? Well, it was thanks to my mother, because as soon as she first saw my grandma Anna, she went straight to her, at the age of 6, raised up both her arms and asked, in a jolly child voice, "Hi, my name is Christina. Would you like to be my mommy?" My grandmother burst in tears, picked her up immediately, and created a connection with my mother, whom she raised and loved as her own. It was not the same for my uncle, as he was 13 at the time and knew his own mother, Margaret, had died and why. He denounced her and made her life much, much harder. My uncle eventually had 2 children of his own, and after raising my mom and uncle, my grandmother raised the girl, and when the boy was born, my grandmother had a calcium crisis that made her faint and she hit her head. She refused to raise my cousin afterwards as she was afraid she would drop the baby. My uncle never forgave her for that and hated her even more. When I was born, I was the light of their lives, as she loved my mother from moment one, and my grandfather Michael adored my mother. Because I am a replica of my mother, same eyes, same face, same body shape, they immediately took to me and raised me. My father worked 3 different jobs, and my mom was a pediatric nurse and worked in shifts. I loved growing up with my grandmother. Like I said, she was an extremely spiritual person. She loved to meditate. She would tell me about her dreams. She taught me how to decode them and what they meant. She told me about ghost encounters she's had in her life, and always told me not to fear any spirit that comes close to me in my life, because ghosts see us as beams of light, guiding them to God when they are confused. Yeah, that was my grandmother Anna for you. She did this until I was 18 years old. We were very close, and I was living 5 minutes away from her, so I could visit her daily. Sometimes I would still sleep at her place. Her hobby was to read the future in some cards she owned. Not tarot cards, but normal cards with some inscriptions, as "Encounter with the Mysterious Man," "Beware Crying Child," "Careful, Dangerous Woman." On the New Year morning of 2017 at 3:15 a.m., I called my Grandma Anna to wish her a Happy New Year and to let her know how much I and my family loved her and appreciated her. I'd like to mention that Romanians rarely express their love by saying "I love you" to our mothers, fathers, grandparents. We consider that you show your love by what you do in your life and how you respect them, rather than to just say the words. That night, for the first time in 23 years, I felt the need to tell her that. I still don't know why. Her voice changed. You could hear her chuckle in soft, happy tears as she told us that she loves us all back and forever will. Nothing seemed suspicious, as I am a very sensitive and emotional woman myself, so the night went on normally. She was at a party. I was at my fiancé's house. The next day, January 1st, 2017, I received a phone call from my father who told me that Grandma Anna had died the previous night. I can't express in words how my heart simply left my body, as if my own existence stopped, refusing to acknowledge that she was dead. I rushed home. The police were there. The ambulance was there. They said she died of a heart attack due to the climate change, same as my grandfather Michael did 11 years before her. Outside it was cold. Inside the house it was too hot, and as she was rushing to change her clothes, her heart couldn't handle the temperature change, her body couldn't balance the heat, and she died. But what I found particularly weird is the time of death. I still had her last phone call at 3:15 a.m. The policemen and ambulance staff had analyzed her and declared her time of death was around midnight. They said there was no way I could have talked to her at 3:15 a.m., as by that time her body would have already entered rigor mortis. Who did I talk to? Because it was her phone number, it was her voice, and she seemed incredibly fine. Call it a sick joke or just medical staff time of death error. Creepy. During her funeral, I decided to write her a goodbye letter, as I am very spiritual, and even though no one will read it, I like to consider she took the message I had for her to heaven to pass it down to my grandmother, Margaret, and 2 grandfathers, Michael and Peter. I wrote in that letter that I do love her a lot, and that I thank her for every sacrifice she's ever done for me, and that I wish her to tell Margaret, my real grandmother, that I love her too, although I have never met her. I put that letter in my grandmother's coffin, kissed her forehead, and watched her go on her last road. My mom knows about the letter. She has yet to ask me what I wrote in it. After her funeral, I get a phone call from my grandmother Anna. At first, I thought it was my father, as he would still use her phone to let our relatives from other countries know she had died. So normally I answer the phone, and I hear something unimaginable, impossible, formidable. I hear my grandmother Anna. I hear her voice clearly. I hear her laughly voice, with intermittence and static occurring whenever she would pause. It was a soft, fading voice, but nothing scary, nothing fearful or intimidating. It made me feel like she was indeed there, but I will admit the whole situation did freak me out. She said to me, "Hello, dear. I called to let you know I passed the message and I love you too." I couldn't reply as the phone call hung up right after. It left me feeling so vulnerable as I thought maybe someone is playing a sick joke, but it couldn't be that. I saw my grandmother be buried myself. I saw the coffin be sealed. I saw the letter exist inside the coffin until the very last second. No one took it out to read it. She had 3 sisters, but they were all dead, and none of them had her voice. No one could have repeated her voice that perfectly. But the even scarier part comes after the first phone call. After another week, I remember it was during another Monday night, 1 week after the first phone call, my phone starts ringing again, under the same number. I answer. I already had forgotten about what happened, and I hear an old lady, a voice I couldn't feel familiar. I didn't know who that lady was. It was a pretty soft but strong voice. It was like a relatively young woman, but an experienced one. I would say around 30 or 40 years or so. I would like to mention that this time I was in the same room with my father, who owned her phone still, and I received the call. Her phone was in front of me on the table and not ringing. I open her phone as I speak on my phone. Her phone had no battery, and it was dead, but I still got her phone call. I answer. I hear this weird lady, and she goes on like this. "Hello, sweetheart. You don't know me, but I do you. I received your message, and I love you too." Then the phone call hangs up again. Needless to say, I started screaming and panicking so hard my dad immediately went to the telephone service to find out who was playing pranks on us. They went through her profile, numbers dialed and received. My number was not in her agenda of calls, so we decided to disable the number. Ever since then, we do not receive calls anymore, but I do go to the cemetery more often and talk to them. This year is the first year of her death, so we are sort of celebrating her memory. But for me, I personally do not celebrate her memory, as I feel she is constantly and physically with me. I often have dreams of her. She would often visit me at nights. I am saying in dreams because I feel like I'm going insane if I ever conclude on these situations being something other than dreams. I guess I am trying to thank you for giving me the possibility to share this with you. If you want to share my story, to all the people out there who will encounter ghosts or paranormal activity, I am going to say what my grandmother Anna taught me all my life. Do not be afraid of them, as they are just confused lost souls who see you as beams of light helping them find God.